I buried $2.4 million before they buried me, and the two people who spent 12 years pretending to love me are still out there right now, exposed, bankrupt, choking on the dust of an inheritance that vanished into thin legal air. They say you cannot take your wealth with you when you die. It is the oldest, most exhausted cliché in the world, a phrase whispered by those who have never built an empire to comfort those who will never inherit one. But what the high-priced financial advisors on Bay Street in Toronto, the boutique estate planners in Miami, and the smiling, soft-spoken lawyers never whisper out loud is how beautifully, flawlessly easy it is to ensure that absolutely nobody else gets it either. Especially not the vultures standing right over your grave. Look at them, through the brutal, suffocating humidity of a Miami October afternoon, down into the pristine manicured lawns of Woodlawn Park Cemetery in Coral Gables, Florida. The sun is dipping low behind the Royal Poinciana trees. It is casting long, golden cinematic shadows across the grass that stretches all the way down to the edge of Biscayne Bay. The air is thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass mixed with Atlantic salt. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hums a low funeral hymn that nobody asked for. There is my husband, Robert, standing under an oversized black umbrella in a bespoke charcoal gray Hugo Boss suit, a suit he confidently charged to my Platinum American Express card just 3 days ago. He is looking down at my heavy mahogany casket, dabbing his eyes with a perfectly folded, monogrammed silk handkerchief. But watch his left hand. Watch it closely. It is resting inside his trouser pocket. His thumb is anxiously, repetitively rubbing the cool, sapphire crystal face of his Rolex Submariner. He isn't consumed by the paralyzing grief of losing a spouse. He is consumed by time. He is mentally calculating the exact number of hours until the probate court hearing scheduled at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse tomorrow morning. And standing a few feet away from him, wearing oversized Celine sunglasses to strategically hide eyes that have not shed a single solitary tear, is Jessica, my stepdaughter, 26 years old. She is holding her umbrella with one manicured hand and her iPhone with the other. She isn't texting extended family members. She isn't scrolling through old photo albums of my life. She is eagerly scrolling through luxury high-rise penthouse listings in Brickell and Edgewater. $9,000 a month. Minimum. They think the single tear that fell from my eye in that sterile, artificially cold room at Mount Sinai Medical Center was born of fear. The primal fear of the end. The fear of the absolute dark. It wasn't. That tear was the byproduct of pure, absolute, unadulterated calculation. $1.2 million in tax-free life insurance cash, an $860,000 Mediterranean estate in Coral Gables, a $327,000 diversified brokerage portfolio. That is the exact mathematical equation keeping them standing in this suffocating Florida heat. They expected a seamless, effortless transition of power. A massive, instantaneous check wired straight into their checking accounts the very moment the ink dried on the county death certificate. What they actually got was a financial extinction event. Now, before I take you deeper into this story, I need you to do something for me. Pause for just 5 seconds. Think about your own family. Think about the people who would show up to your funeral. And ask yourself one brutally honest question. Do they love you? Or do they love what you are worth? If that question made your stomach drop even slightly, you need to hear every single word of what comes next. Because in my family, love was a rapidly depreciating asset. But bankruptcy? Bankruptcy is permanent. Let me take you back. 6 months before my heart rate monitor finally flatlined. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The brutal Miami summer was just starting to break. The heavy emerald leaves on the banyan trees lining our quiet street in Coral Gables were perfectly still. Zip code 33146. It is a stunning, affluent neighborhood. The kind of place where every Spanish-style villa has a pristine terracotta roof, a sweeping 2-car garage hiding imported German engineering, and a flawless marriage hiding a devastating cancerous secret. I had just come home from the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of Miami. I was still shaking, my hands gripping the hand-stitched leather steering wheel of my Volvo until my knuckles turned completely white. The PET scan had been utterly definitive. The tumor had maliciously bypassed the surgical margins. It had metastasized to my liver. My oncologist, a brilliant young woman with kind, deeply exhausted eyes who had delivered this exact news to thousands of families, had sat across from me, in a room that smelled of rubbing alcohol and bleached linen. She put her pen down on her desk, folded her hands, and said the words no human being is ever fully prepared to hear. Mrs. Vance, the chemotherapy protocols are no longer holding the line. We are out of aggressive medical options. I think it is time for you to put your affairs in order. Put your affairs in order. In the polished, sanitized halls of the medical community, that is the polite, liability-free translation for start saying your final goodbyes. Because your biological clock is rapidly, unstoppably running out. 4 months. That was the generous estimate. 4 months of watching your own body betray you. 4 months of knowing the exact shape of the finish line. When most people hear those words, they crumble into dust. They pull out their phones in the hot hospital parking lot. They call their husbands, their wives, their children. They weep uncontrollably. They ask for forgiveness for old arguments. They seek the desperate, clinging warmth of human connection. I wanted to do exactly that. Driving down US 1, fighting through the chaotic Miami afternoon traffic, all I wanted in the entire world was to unlock my heavy mahogany front door, to collapse into my husband's arms, to bury my face in his chest and hear him fiercely whisper that we were going to fight this until the bitter end. Instead, I unlocked the front door. I stepped onto the cold travertine tile of the foyer, and I heard Robert's voice echoing from the open kitchen. He didn't hear me come in. He was leaning against the Calicut marble island, the exact same imported marble I had paid for entirely out of my own savings when we renovated the house 3 years ago. He was wearing his tailored golf polo. He had a heavy crystal tumbler of Macallan 18 single malt scotch in his hand. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. "Yeah, David, listen to me," Robert was saying, his voice completely steady, radiating an unnatural confidence. "The liquidity event is coming much sooner than we originally projected." He laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't the broken, hollow sound of a man facing the catastrophic loss of his life partner. It was a deeply relaxed, arrogant, triumphant chuckle, the kind of laugh a man lets out at the Riviera Country Club when he just sank a 30-foot putt to win a $1,000 bet. "As soon as the estate clears probate," Robert continued, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, listening to the heavy ice clink against the crystal. "I'm putting the hard deposit down on the boat, the Azimuth 53 flybridge. I already talked to the marine broker up in Fort Lauderdale. Just make sure the paperwork is ready the second I give you the green light." I stood frozen in the hallway shadows. The terminal diagnosis was still a burning lump of coal lodged in my throat. My hands were still trembling from the hospital air conditioning, and my husband of 12 years was on the phone with his wealth advisor, explicitly and joyfully planning how to liquidate the financial value of my impending death. Liquidity event. That is what my entire life, my career, my existence boiled down to. A maturity date on a biological bond. But the universe wasn't done breaking me. Because then, echoing tinny and loud from the speakerphone resting on the marble counter, I heard another voice. "Jessica, my stepdaughter, 26 years old, a girl who had never held a real W-2 job longer than 3 consecutive months. Preferring to refer to herself as a digital lifestyle creator with 11,000 followers and absolutely zero taxable income. Daddy," Jessica's voice whined through the speaker, thick with entitled, breathless anticipation, "I want the condo in Brickell. The corner unit on the 42nd floor with the wraparound balcony. Elena promised it to me." I closed my eyes. The cold truth washed over me. I had never promised her a single square foot of real estate. Not once. Not ever. And the jewelry, Jessica continued, her words speeding up with greedy, frantic excitement. Tell me I'm getting the vintage Cartier watch and her mother's pearls. She never even wears them anymore. They're just sitting in the safe collecting dust. Robert took a slow, deliberate sip of his Macallan. Baby girl, listen to your father. You are getting everything you want. Just be patient. Let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. He was talking about my terminal pancreatic cancer the way a day trader talks about waiting for a tech stock to vest. And then, Jessica giggled. A sharp, high-pitched, genuine giggle of pure delight. I stood there in the hallway of my own home, and something profound and terrifying happened inside the center of my chest. My heart didn't break. It didn't shatter into a million tragic pieces. It shifted, like a heavy tungsten steel gear clicking into a permanent locked position. The grief, the paralyzing fear of death, the desperate human desire for comfort, it all instantly drained out of my veins. And something icy, mathematically precise and deeply methodical took its place. I didn't confront him. I didn't step into the kitchen and scream. A screaming match is just an emotional release, and emotional releases achieve absolutely nothing of structural value. I walked upstairs silently, taking off my shoes so my footsteps wouldn't make a sound on the hardwood floor. I went into the master suite, locked the heavy bathroom door, and looked at myself in the vanity mirror under the harsh LED lights. The woman staring back at me was rapidly fading. My skin was translucent, mapping the delicate blue veins underneath. The brutal rounds of chemotherapy had taken my hair months ago. The expensive lace front wig I wore looked almost natural, but not quite. I looked exactly like a woman who was losing the ultimate battle. I looked like a victim. But behind those tired, sunken eyes, a supreme predator was waking up. Before I married Robert. Before I became the quiet, accommodating, wealthy housewife of Coral Gables. I was a senior forensic accountant. For 23 years, I audited the darkest, most corrupt corners of Fortune 500 companies in downtown Manhattan, Bay Street in Toronto, and Brickell Avenue in Miami. I uncovered a $40 million embezzlement scheme meticulously hidden inside a massive hedge fund on Park Avenue. I sat on witness stands and testified under oath before federal grand juries in the Southern District of New York. I was professionally trained to find a single, dirty, misallocated dollar hidden inside a digital haystack made of 10,000 encrypted receipts. I didn't read people's emotions. I read their bank statements. I read their general ledgers. Because humans lie. Humans deceive. Humans pretend to cry at hospital beds. But numbers do not possess the capacity to lie. That woman was absolutely not going to let a mediocre golf-playing parasite like Robert Vance and his spoiled daughter pick her bones clean. If Robert and Jessica wanted a liquidity event, I was going to give them a financial drought so severe, so legally airtight, so systematically destructive, they would choke on the dust. But first I needed raw intelligence. You cannot utterly destroy an enemy if you do not know their exact financial position. That night, after Robert had consumed his third scotch and passed out in the guest bedroom, claiming my nighttime coughing disrupted his delicate sleep cycle, I slipped out of bed. The house was dead silent save for the hum of the central air conditioning and the distant rhythm of the sprinklers on the golf course next door. I went into his home office. He was a deeply careless man, blinded by his own arrogance. He left his MacBook Pro sitting on the mahogany desk, asleep but not powered down. I knew his password. It was his golf handicap followed by Jessica's birth year. Pathetic. I sat in his leather chair and spent 3 uninterrupted hours doing exactly what I do best. I didn't just look at his joint checking account. I dug ruthlessly into his entire digital footprint. A forensic accountant doesn't just look at where the money is. We look at where the money is trying to hide. I bypassed his superficial email folders and dove into his encrypted cloud backups. I traced IP addresses and parsed through his deleted browser history. I performed a comprehensive, merciless lifestyle audit on my own husband. And what I found was worse than I imagined. Yes, I found hidden credit card statements he had routed to a secret post office box down in Kendall. He had $48,000 in revolving high-interest credit card debt. The itemized charges told a story of a man living a phantom life. Dinners at Prime 112, expensive bottles of Opus One, boutique hotel rooms in South Beach on Tuesday nights when he told me he was traveling to Orlando for real estate seminars. I found an account on an offshore crypto exchange. By analyzing the blockchain ledgers and matching the timestamps to withdrawals from our joint account, I realized he had recently lost $62,000 trying to day trade obscure digital coins, desperately trying to cover his tracks and hit a jackpot that never came. I found the lease agreement for his BMW X7. Nay, a luxury SUV he had explicitly told me he bought in cash with his own savings before we got married. He was actually financing it at an exorbitant predatory 14% interest rate because his credit utilization ratio was severely maxed out. Robert Vance wasn't just waiting for me to die so he could upgrade his lifestyle. Robert Vance was secretly, desperately drowning. His personal net worth was wildly negative. He was a walking, breathing house of cards. And my upcoming life insurance policy payout was the only thing standing between him and total catastrophic financial ruin. I closed his laptop at 3 a.m. The glowing Apple logo faded into black. I had all the ammunition I would ever need. Now it was time to build the weapon. 3 months left. The very next morning, I debuted my greatest acting performance. I called it The Fading Wife. I shuffled downstairs in my oversized, worn terry cloth bathrobe. I forced a deep, rattling cough from my chest. I let my voice crack and tremble with manufactured vulnerability. I slouched my shoulders, making my physical presence as small and pitiful as humanly possible. Robert was in the kitchen blending a protein shake. "Robert," I whispered, leaning heavily against the doorframe, clutching my chest. "I need you to help me. My mind is getting so foggy with the pain medication. The doctors say it's going to get worse before the end. I want to sign a power of attorney. I want you to take over everything. I don't want to be a burden to you anymore." His eyes lit up. It wasn't the warm, reassuring light of a husband wanting to comfort his ailing wife. It was the blinding electric flash of pure, unadulterated opportunity. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, setting his shaker cup down and rushing over to hold my arms with fake tenderness. "Of course. That's a very smart move. You let me handle all the heavy financial lifting. You just focus on resting. Let me take the wheel." He practically jogged back to his home office. He opened the digital wall safe hidden behind the bookshelf. He came back with a thick stack of documents he had clearly printed weeks ago, just sitting there, waiting for this exact morbid moment. A general durable power of attorney, a sweeping, all-encompassing legal document that would give him the absolute right to drain my bank accounts, sell my house, and change my life insurance beneficiaries to his own name. What Robert didn't know was that I had already been inside that wall safe. 2 nights prior, though I had carefully memorized the exact documents he had hidden there. The font, the margins, the staple placement, and I had drafted my own counter documents as he placed the heavy stack of papers on the kitchen table and turned his back for exactly 4 seconds to grab his favorite silver pen. My hands moved with the flawless, practiced speed of a casino card dealer. I slid his general power of attorney off the table and dropped it silently into the deep pocket of my bathrobe. In its exact place, I slid the document I had printed. A limited power of attorney, strictly, explicitly, and permanently limited to negotiating medical billing with my health insurance provider and making end-of-life healthcare decisions. Nothing else. Absolutely zero banking access, zero real estate authority, zero financial leverage whatsoever. He turned back and handed me the pen. I took it, letting my hand shake violently, ensuring the signature looked weak, scattered, and desperate. Robert didn't read a single paragraph. He was too euphoric. He just watched the blue ink hit the paper, saw what his greedy heart desperately wanted to see, and smiled a wide, brilliant smile. "Don't worry about a single thing," he said, kissing the top of my wig. already visualizing his yacht. "I'll take care of everything." "Yes, Robert," I thought to myself, staring blankly at the marble counter. "You will take care of everything. Just not in the way you think." 2 months left. That afternoon, under the strict guise of attending a specialized pain management therapy session at the hospital, I drove my Volvo down Interstate 95 toward Brickell Avenue. I didn't go to a clinic. I parked in the cavernous underground garage of a sleek, quiet glass tower. I took the private elevator to the 10th floor. The heavy brass plaque on the frosted glass door read, "Sterling and Associates. Estate Planning, Wealth Preservation, and Trust Administration." Harold Sterling was 71 years old, a former senior partner at a ruthless, notoriously aggressive white shoe law firm in Manhattan. He had mentored me when I was 25 years old, guiding me through my very first forensic audit on a corrupt international shipping company. Harold Sterling taught me the single most important lesson of my entire professional life. The legal system has absolutely nothing to do with morality or justice. The law is strictly about architecture. If you build the legal structure correctly with the right steel and the right concrete, it is an impenetrable fortress that will stand forever, repelling every single attack. If you build it wrong, the entire building collapses on top of you and crushes you to dust. "Elena," Harold said softly, standing up behind his massive mahogany desk as I walked in. His office smelled like expensive aged leather, dark Cuban espresso, and old money. Behind him, the floor-to-ceiling hurricane windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Biscayne Bay. "I reviewed the deep-dive financials you sent over on the encrypted drive," Harold said, his face grave. "The Irrevocable Trust documents are fully drafted. The pour-over will is ready as a backup. The Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust is structured and primed. But I need you to look me in the eye right now, Elena, and tell me you understand the absolute gravity of what we are about to do. Once we execute these documents, and once we physically fund this trust, there is no going back. None. You will legally own nothing. Your husband will have absolutely no legal claim to your estate. Your stepdaughter will receive 0 direct inheritance. Not unless they meet the exact brutal, unforgiving conditions you have outlined." I thought about Robert's laugh. I thought about the Azimuth 53 yacht. I thought about Jessica's giggle. "Harold," I said, my voice steady, cold, and entirely devoid of mercy. "Burn the bridge." He nodded once. He opened a thick black leather binder. And we went to war. Now listen to me. What we built in that office over the next 3 hours is the exact legal architecture that most people never learn about until it is far too late. And I am going to explain every single piece to you, not in legal jargon, in plain, brutal English. Because whether you live in Miami, Los Angeles, Houston, or Toronto, this knowledge could be the difference between your family thriving and your family tearing itself apart. Step 1. The fortress walls. Our home in Coral Gables. 4 bedrooms, a massive saltwater pool, currently appraised at $860,000. Robert assumed it was marital property simply because he lived in it, slept in it, and drank his scotch in it. He assumed wrong. I bought that house in 2003, 5 years before Robert and I ever met. I paid the down payment with my own money. It was in my name alone. Florida real estate and family law is exceptionally specific about this. Separate property remains entirely separate property unless the original owner makes the fatal, irreversible mistake of commingling it by putting the new spouse's name on the deed. I never added Robert's name. He never asked, arrogantly assuming the probate courts would just hand it to him on a silver platter as my grieving widower. If you own property in Canada, the same principle applies, but with critical differences. In Ontario, for example, the matrimonial home has special protections under the Family Law Act regardless of whose name is on the title. But an irrevocable trust or an alter ego trust, if you are over 65, can still provide powerful creditor protection and probate avoidance. Know your jurisdiction. It matters more than you think. Sterling drafted the warranty deed transfer. Right there on the desk, while my liver throbbed with cancer, we moved the title of the property from Elena Vance individual directly to the Elena Vance Irrevocable Trust. The county recording fee to file the paperwork was exactly $107. $107 to make an $800,000 physical asset vanish into thin air. Completely, undeniably, legally. Step 2. The liquid assets. I had a primary brokerage account at Charles Schwab containing $327,000. A meticulously balanced mix of blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, and S&P 500 index funds, built brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck over 15 years. Sterling and I executed the transfer on death forms. We didn't liquidate or close the account. That would trigger a massive capital gains tax event with the IRS. We simply changed the beneficiary designation. Instead of Robert Vance, the new unalterable permanent beneficiary was the trust. Step 3. The crown jewel. The life insurance policy. $1.2 million in cold tax-free cash. This was the exact money Robert was counting on to pay off his hidden credit card debt, escape his underwater car lease, and fund his waterfront playboy lifestyle. I used an ILIT, an Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. 2 years prior, long before the diagnosis, I had legally transferred the ownership of the policy itself to the trust and changed the sole beneficiary to the trust. The insurance company processed it quietly in their back offices. Robert received no notification in the mail, no email alert. Why would he? He was never the policy owner. I was. By placing the policy inside an ILIT, that $1.2 million was instantly shielded from federal estate taxes. More importantly, it was entirely protected from any aggressive medical creditors who might try to collect on my mounting hospital bills after I passed. And in Canada, life insurance proceeds paid to a named beneficiary are generally creditor protected as well. But the trust structure adds an additional layer of control over how and when the money flows. Step 4. The moat around the castle. The Spendthrift Clause. Listen to me carefully, because this is the nuclear code of wealth preservation. A Spendthrift Clause is a specific legal provision, explicitly written into the trust document, that states the beneficiaries cannot pledge, assign, sell, or transfer their future interest in the trust to anyone else. In plain, ruthless English, it means their creditors cannot seize the trust assets to satisfy their debts. Even if Robert gambled away his last dime on crypto, even if he owed $100,000 to American Express, even if he threw his hands up and filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, no federal judge and no predatory debt collector in the state of Florida could pierce the veil of my trust to take that money. And crucially, Robert himself could not demand a lump sum payout. The money was locked inside a titanium vault, and he would only get exactly what Harold Sterling decided to distribute to him, based solely on the brutal conditions I wrote. Step 5. Elena's rules. Robert would receive a monthly maintenance stipend, $2,000, not a single penny more, enough to rent a cheap apartment in a bad zip code and buy groceries, but only if he met a strict, humiliating condition precedent. Every 30 days, Robert had to submit to and pass a hair follicle drug test administered by a certified third-party medical laboratory. A standard urine test is a joke. It checks if you used substances over the weekend. A hair follicle test is a biological ledger. It provides an undeniable 90-day historical record. You cannot cheat it. You cannot flush it out. It is absolute proof. Jessica's rules were different. The trust would conditionally fund her educational expenses, tuition, required textbooks, and lab fees. But the money would be paid directly to the institution, not a check to her name. She was required to enroll full-time at an accredited university, and she was legally mandated to maintain a cumulative GPA of 3.0 or higher. And finally, the ultimate kill switch. Article 7, the In Terrorem Clause, also known as a no-contest clause. If any beneficiary named herein challenges this trust, contests its validity, files any lawsuit against the trust estate or attempts to remove the trustee, they are automatically, immediately, and permanently disinherited. No appeals, no second chances. If you sue the trust, you get nothing forever. The trust also maintained a dedicated legal defense reserve of $1 million. Try to fight a fortress when you can't afford a slingshot. I signed every single page, dozens of signatures. My hand cramped. My stomach burned with agony, but my grip didn't shake once. We funded the trust that exact same day. By 5 o'clock that Tuesday afternoon, Elena Vance was technically the poorest woman in Coral Gables. I owned absolutely nothing. My net worth on paper was zero, but the invisible, untouchable legal phantom that bore my name was a heavily armored financial titan worth nearly $2.5 million. 6 weeks left. The weeks that followed were an absolute masterclass in extreme patience. I lay in the hospital-style mechanical bed we had set up in the guest room overlooking the Coral Gables golf course. Well, the morphine drip hummed softly beside me. The humid Miami breeze carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine through the open window. And I just watched. Have you ever watched someone plan your funeral and spend your money while you were still breathing? It is a psychological experience you never forget. It strips away every illusion you ever held about human nature. Robert leased the BMW X7, $1,400 a month, premium cashmere seats, the full executive package. He stopped paying the mortgage on the house. 3 months in a row. Why bother? The life insurance payout would wipe the mortgage clean the exact moment I was gone. He went to the design district and bought a Rolex Submariner on high-interest credit, $4,200. Jessica was exponentially worse. She brought an interior designer named Diane into my home while I was hooked up to the IV upstairs. I heard every single word echoing up the grand staircase. "We are definitely going to rip out this entire carpet," Jessica said, standing right in the doorway of my bedroom, gesturing dismissively. "It smells like old people and sickness." She didn't know that the carpet she was so eager to rip out was a hand-knotted Persian silk rug from Isfahan, brought over by my mother from Tehran before the revolution in 1979. Appraised at $35,000. But that is the tragic, fatal flaw of people who have never worked a day in their lives. They know the retail price tag of everything, but they do not understand the underlying value of anything. Every dollar they spent, every high-interest debt they piled up, this was another heavy iron nail in the coffin of their future, and I was the one lying in the dark, quietly handing them the hammer. But then something happened that I did not anticipate. One night around 2 a.m, I woke up to a strange, suffocating silence. The house was too quiet. I unhooked my IV stand, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, and walked slowly, painfully toward the kitchen. And I saw him, Robert, sitting alone at the marble island. The lights were entirely off. He was just staring at the glowing screen of his phone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't planning yacht purchases. He wasn't performing for his country club friends. He was just perfectly, hauntingly silent. For a brief, agonizing moment, he looked incredibly tired. He looked fragile. He looked human. And something deep inside my chest shifted. Just slightly. I stood there in the absolute dark, leaning against the hallway wall. And I thought, did I go too far? Was this righteous punishment, or was this pure, unadulterated destruction? Was I about to completely erase the only family I had left in this world? I could stop it. Right there. One single phone call to Harold Sterling in the morning. One signature on a revocation form. I could undo the trust. I could give them exactly what they expected. I could buy myself a softer, kinder ending. Pause this right now, seriously, because I need you to sit with that moment. Have you ever been so deeply hurt by someone you loved that your pain transformed into a weapon? And have you ever stood at that exact crossroads wondering if pulling the trigger makes you the hero or the villain? That is where I was standing, in the dark, in my own kitchen, with a decision that could never be undone. Robert looked up. The glow of the phone illuminated his eyes. He saw me standing there, and instantly, like a machine resetting its programming, he switched. "Oh, hey," he said, his voice jumping an octave, rushing to put his phone face down on the marble. "You shouldn't be up. Let me get you some water. You look terrible, honey. It was too fast. It was too rehearsed. It was entirely fake." The mask had slammed back into place. The moment of grace was gone, and so was every ounce of my doubt. "No," I said quietly, turning my back to him. "I shouldn't." I walked back to my hospital bed, and that was the absolute last time I ever questioned the plan, because I realized a fundamental truth that night. Some people do not need to be destroyed by external forces. They simply need to be left completely alone with the brutal consequences of who they already are. 2 weeks left. Then the night finally came. December 14th. Outside, a violent, sudden Florida thunderstorm was lashing against the hurricane impact windows, rattling the glass. Inside, the medical monitor beside my bed began to beep slower and slower. The hospice nurse, a quiet professional woman named Maria, gently adjusted my morphine drip to ease the transition. The room smelled intensely of medical antiseptic and the faint scent of white roses someone had sent. Probably a colleague, definitely not my husband. Robert was in the house, but he wasn't sitting by my bedside holding my frail hand. He was downstairs in my home office. I could hear the frantic opening and slamming of the heavy metal filing cabinet drawers. He was looking for the original will. He had been tearing the house apart for 3 solid weeks. He never found it, because the only documents that mattered were locked securely in Harold Sterling's fireproof steel vault on the 10th floor of that quiet Brickell building. I closed my eyes. The monitor slowed to a whisper, and in that final fading moment, staring into the encroaching dark, I felt complete, profound peace. Not because I was ready to leave this earth, but because I knew with the mathematical certainty of a perfectly balanced ledger that every document was filed, every asset was transferred, every legal trap was perfectly, flawlessly set. The last sound I ever heard on this earth was the hospice nurse stepping out into the hallway, her voice urgent over the sound of the thunder. "Mr. Vance!" she called out. "Mr. Vance, you should come in here. It's time." I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor. They weren't the frantic, panicked steps of a man losing his soulmate. They were slow, reluctant, heavy, like a man walking toward a mandatory corporate meeting he never scheduled. The doctor officially called the time of death at 11:42 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Elena Vance was gone, but the architect's masterpiece was just beginning to deploy. The next 72 hours revealed exactly who they were. They didn't even wait for my body to reach the funeral home on Flagler Street before the looting began. Jessica went through my jewelry box at 9 the next morning. She bypassed the custom pieces and went straight for my mother's pearl necklace. A flawless strand of Akoya pearls my mother wore on her wedding day in 1971. She listed them on eBay. Estate sale find vintage pearls, sold for $212 to someone in Ohio. Appraised value $4,800. But Jessica had never learned the difference between costume jewelry and generational wealth. She just saw something old and wanted it gone. Robert called Northwestern Mutual at 8:30 the next morning. "I need to file a death claim on my wife's life insurance. Sir, you are not listed as the beneficiary on this policy. The beneficiary was permanently changed to the Elena Vance Irrevocable Trust. You would need to contact the designated trustee." Robert hung up, called back, same answer. Called a third time, demanded a supervisor, same answer. The color drained from his face like water spiraling down a drain. 5 days later, the certified letters arrived. Reading of the last will and trust disposition of Elena Marie Vance, Sterling and Associates, Brickell Avenue, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Robert pumped his fist in the kitchen. Finally, payday. Tuesday morning, they walked into Sterling's 10th floor office like they owned the building. Robert spread his legs wide in the leather chair, taking up as much space as possible. Jessica was aggressively popping pink gum and scrolling luxury rentals in Edgewater. Sterling walked in. He didn't smile. He placed a single extraordinarily thick black binder on the mahogany desk. The sound it made when it hit the wood was heavy. Final. It sounded like a vault door slamming shut. The gum popping stopped. Let us begin. He read the pour-over will. Everything poured into the trust. Robert received nothing directly. The house locks were already professionally drilled and changed, listed for sale. All proceeds to the Elena Vance Medical Debt Relief Fund. Jessica dropped her phone. My clothes are in there. My bags. My life. Boxed by a bonded moving company. You have exactly 30 days. Sterling read each asset, the brokerage, or the life insurance, all legally inside the trust. Robert gets $2,000 a month only if he passes the hair follicle test. Jessica gets tuition only with full-time enrollment and a 3.0 GPA. When Robert threatened to sue, Sterling read Article 7, the in terrorem clause. Contest and you lose everything permanently. The trust has a $1 million legal defense reserve. Your net worth, Mr. Vance, is approximately negative $47,000. Robert sank back into his chair. Jessica was crying, real devastating tears. Dad, she whispered, where are we going to live? Robert had one desperate card left, or so he thought. My grandmother's diamond ring, an immaculate 2-carat stone set in heavy platinum smuggled out of Havana in 1962. He tore the house apart that night and found the velvet box hidden deep inside a rusted air vent in the master bathroom. He smiled. Salvation. He didn't go to a reputable jeweler. He needed untraceable cash. He drove straight to a seedy pawnbroker on Northwest 7th Avenue. Bulletproof glass, barred windows, a heavy buzzer on the steel door. The fluorescent lights inside hummed and flickered. The place smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap pine air freshener. This ring is worth $50,000 easy, Robert told the man pushing the velvet box under the glass slot. I need 30. Cash. Right now. The broker, an old man with tired eyes, picked it up. He screwed a jeweler's loop into his eye. He turned the ring under the harsh, blinding halogen light. He looked up at Robert with pure pity. 50,000? The broker laughed a dry, hacking cough. For a cubic zirconia? I'll give you $20 for the platinum setting. The stone is glass buddy. I had swapped the stone 5 years ago. I paid a jeweler $200 to set a flawless piece of cut glass into the antique setting. The real diamond sits safely in a secure deposit box at a Bank of America branch in Coconut Grove, legally held in the name of the trust. Robert walked out of that pawn shop with absolutely nothing. He sat in the driver's seat of the BMW he couldn't afford and stared blankly at the steering wheel. Day 30. Eviction day. The sheriff's deputy arrived at the Coral Gables house at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, with a formal writ of possession signed by a judge in the 11th Judicial Circuit of Florida. Jessica was escorted out onto the lawn in her silk pajamas. She screamed. She cursed my name to the heavens. The wealthy neighbors on both sides came out onto their manicured porches and watched the spectacle. The exact same neighbors Robert had bragged to about his upcoming massive wealth. The humiliation was absolute, and then the universe delivered the final punchline. The second truck arrived. It wasn't a moving truck. It was a heavy-duty flatbed with a massive steel hook. The repo man. Robert had missed 3 consecutive payments on the BMW X7. The hydraulic arm lifted the front wheels of the luxury SUV off the ground. The BMW rolled backward onto the flatbed like a heavy coffin being loaded into a hearse. Robert stood on the curb. No house, no car, no wife, no money. An email notification popped up on his phone. Credit score update, 450, 450. In North America, whether you are in Florida or Ontario, that specific number means you are financially dead. You cannot rent a 1-bedroom apartment. You cannot finance a used Honda Civic. You cannot get a basic credit card with a $200 limit. You are a financial ghost. 3 months later, Robert filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in the Southern District of Florida. His listed assets were clothing, a fake Rolex watch, and a cracked cell phone. Total value under $2,000. His debts were $114,000. He moved into a weekly motel on Biscayne Boulevard. He got a job washing luxury cars at a hand wash spot off Flagler Street. Minimum wage plus tips. He spends 10 hours a day washing the exact same cars he used to lease. But Jessica, something entirely unexpected happened. The destruction of her safety net forced an evolution. She moved into a cramped, noisy apartment in Hialeah with a roommate from Craigslist. She got a job waiting tables at a busy, greasy diner near Miami-Dade College. The tips were terrible. The shifts were grueling. Her feet bled at the end of the day, but she enrolled. One class at first. Introduction to Biology. She studied at the diner counter during her 15-minute breaks. She passed with a B+. The trust paid her tuition, just as I instructed. A check mailed directly to the registrar's office. She took another class the next semester, then 2 more. Then she hit a wall. Organic chemistry. She failed the midterm. She sat in the parking lot of the diner that night and cried so hard the steering wheel of her 12-year-old Honda shook. She almost quit. She almost called her father and gave up. But she didn't. She retook the exam. She passed. Something inside her had shifted, the same way something shifted inside me in that dark hallway. She transferred into the competitive nursing program. She studied anatomy flashcards on the public bus. She practiced drawing blood on rubber arms in the clinical lab. She worked 30 hours a week to pay rent and studied 20 more to keep her GPA above a 3.0. It took her 4 brutal years, but she finished. Jessica Lynn Vance graduated with a degree in nursing. She passed the NTLEX State Board exam on her very first attempt. She secured a job in the oncology ward at Jackson Memorial Hospital, one of the largest public trauma hospitals in the United States. She treats terminal cancer patients, people exactly like me. And here is what she told a colleague on her first day in the ward, holding the hand of an elderly woman who was terrified of the dark. I know what it feels like to lose everything, and I know what it feels like when someone refuses to let you stay lost. And the money? The $1.2 million from the life insurance, plus the $300,000 from the investments, plus the $800,000 from the sale of the Coral Gables house? It all flowed seamlessly into the Elena Vance Medical Debt Relief Fund. Every single year, Harold Sterling identifies massive portfolios of defaulted medical debt, the kind that predatory debt collectors buy for pennies on the dollar to harass sick people. The trust buys that debt in bulk, and then it permanently cancels it. Strangers all across North America, families in Ohio, Texas, Georgia, Ontario, British Columbia, and right here in Florida. They wake up, open their mail, and find a certified letter that says, "Your medical debt of $14,327 has been paid in full by the Elena Vance Medical Debt Relief Fund. You owe absolutely nothing." Last year alone, the fund completely erased $4.7 million in medical debt. Families who thought they would lose their homes to medical bankruptcy realized the weight crushing their chests had simply vanished. Think about that. Really think about it. Over 40% of adults in America carry some form of medical debt.
In Canada, the situation is different, but rising prescription costs and uncovered treatments are pushing more families into financial crisis every year. The system is designed to crush people at their most vulnerable. And a single trust created by one dying woman in Coral Gables is quietly dismantling that system, one canceled debt at a time. Now, let me tell you something that I wish someone had told me 30 years ago. Because this is the part that could literally change the trajectory of your family's future. Most hardworking people rely on a simple will. A will feels official.
It feels safe. But a will is a glass house. The very moment you die, your will goes straight into probate court. Probate is a painful public legal process where a judge oversees the distribution of your life's work. Anyone can access it. Anyone can contest it. It takes months, sometimes years. and it is devastatingly expensive. In states like Florida, probate attorneys can legally charge up to 3% of the total estate value. In Ontario, Canada, the estate administration tax is $15 per thousand on everything above $50,000. That is 1.5% eaten by the government before your family sees anything. On a $1 million estate, that is $15,000 in Ontario alone. Gone. Evaporated. A trust is a titanium vault. It is private. It is not filed with the court. It does not go through probate. It is completely invisible to the public and to greedy relatives. When I died, there was no court hearing, no judge, no waiting period. Harold Sterling simply executed the terms I had written, quietly, efficiently, ruthlessly. The Spendthrift Clause exists in almost every jurisdiction in North America. It legally prevents beneficiaries from assigning pledging or selling their future trust interests to creditors, even under bankruptcy. The money is protected not because it is hidden, but because the law itself guards it. And the ILIT removed the life insurance from my taxable estate entirely. Without it, and if the estate was large enough, federal estate taxes could have consumed up to 40%. Instead, the full pristine amount went directly to the trust. Every single dollar preserved. If you're watching from Canada, the same core principles apply through family trusts or alter ego trusts if you're over 65. You can transfer assets out of your estate to avoid probate fees, gain creditor protection, and maintain total control over distributions. But remember the 21-year deemed disposition rule, and always consult a licensed Canadian estate lawyer who specializes in trust structures. This is a dramatized fictional story created for entertainment and educational illustration only. Estate planning laws are complex and vary by state and province. This is not legal, tax, or financial advice. Always consult qualified licensed professionals in your area before making any decisions. 5 years later, Robert is 60 years old. Standing in the blistering Miami sun, he looks 75. His hands are cracked and rough from the harsh car wash chemicals. He still blames me. He tells anyone who will listen at the sticky motel bar that his dead wife cheated him, that I stole what was rightfully his. He has never, not for one single second, considered that he was the sole architect of his own destruction. But Jessica is entirely different. She works the agonizing night shift at Jackson Memorial. She holds the fragile hands of patients who are terrified of the dark. She administers pain medication to people whose bodies are failing them. She sits with devastated families in the cold waiting room and tells them the hard truth gently, the exact way someone should have told me. Last Christmas, she drove her used Honda Civic to Woodlawn Park Cemetery. She walked through the wet grass and brought a small bouquet of white lilies. She knelt beside my polished granite headstone. She didn't ask for a handout. She didn't complain about her rent. She looked at my name and said 2 words. Thank you. She wiped her eyes. You forced me to grow up. I hated you for it. I hated you for a really long time, but you were right. And I'm just sorry I didn't see it sooner. She sat there in the quiet Miami breeze for 20 minutes. Then she stood up, adjusted her scrubs, and went back to the hospital to save lives. That was the real inheritance, not the cash, not the real estate, not the diversified stocks or the insurance payouts. Character, resilience, the profound understanding that absolutely nothing in this world is given to you. Everything must be earned. Money is a mirror. It amplifies exactly who you already are. Give $1 million to a fool, and it will destroy him faster and more thoroughly than poverty ever could. Give a $1,000 opportunity to a hard worker, and she will build a foundation that no one can ever take away. So let me ask you something. Right now, what is your plan? Have you ever really thought about what happens to your life's work when your heart stops beating? Have you thought about who actually gets the money, and more importantly, whether they possess the character to use it wisely? Look around your dinner table tonight. Are you blindly building wealth for vultures who are just checking their watches waiting for you to die? Or are you building an impenetrable legal fortress that protects the people you actually love and forces the ones who need it to finally grow up? If you died tomorrow, would your family thrive, or would they tear each other apart for the scraps? Do not wait for the devastating medical diagnosis. Do not wait for the tired doctor to sit you down and tell you to put your affairs in order. Here is what you need to do today, right now. Go to the comments section below and type these exact words. I am building my fortress. Let it serve as a public promise to yourself and your family. Then pick up the phone. Call an estate planning attorney or a trust specialist in your jurisdiction. Ask them about an irrevocable trust. Ask them to draft a Spendthrift Clause. Ask them to review every single one of your beneficiary designations. These are not secret tools reserved only for billionaires. A full trust package costs a fraction of what a messy public probate battle would destroy. I am Elena Vance. I was a forensic accountant from Miami, Florida. I found corporate fraud for a living. And when the people I lived with committed the absolute greatest fraud of all, pretending to love me while quietly waiting for me to die, I did exactly what I was trained to do. I followed the money. I locked the vault, and I made sure every single cent went exactly where it needed to go. This was my dying wish. It wasn't about revenge, it was about legacy. Make yours count. Share this with one person who needs to hear it before it is too late. And if this story woke something up inside you, subscribe. Because the next chapter is already in the works. Your future self is watching.